Closing a deal is much more of an art than a science. There's no sort of hard, fast rules that you can follow to guarantee that a deal will close. Anyone who tells you that is trying to sell you something. But there are things along the way that I've picked up in my 7 years as a contract engineer that has improved my close rate, my success ratio. The most important thing I would take away is that closing a deal is much more of an emotional process than people give it credit for. It's a lot like making new friends. It's a lot like meeting new people and establishing personal relationships. A lot of the same dynamics take place in closing a deal. A client wants to know that he or she can trust you in a tough situation, that they can count on you, and that they, on some level, like you. That's not a requirement, but it helps. These things help. And so you want to take those factors into account. Given that this process can be more personal than people realize, one thing that I've picked up on over the years is that whenever I meet with a prospective client in person, my close rate is much, much higher. So to the extent possible, you should be trying to establish an in-person meeting with your prospective client and meet them face-to-face. If that's not possible because of geographic limitations, then some other substitute is better than nothing. So for example, a face-to-face video chat via Google Hangout or Slack or Skype or whatever. And that's better than just a regular phone call or email or anything purely digital. There's no better way to convey, there's no better way to establish an emotional connection than through in-person, obviously. Beyond that, the nature of the interaction dictates how well a person closes or not. One thing that I really don't like when another salesman is trying to close me is when that person is not listening to my problems. We are not having a dialogue. That person is essentially talking at me, even when I'm trying to engage him or her in a constructive back and forth. Typically what I'm doing is I'm articulating what my current problems are and my needs are. And what I'm hoping for is for that person to give me for that person to give me a concrete set of steps, a concrete set of steps or actions that he would take to solve my problem. I actually had this exact exchange today. A marketing firm reached out to me here in Washington, D.C. They had found me on the interwebs, whatever, and they contacted me unsolicited, and I get those around once a week or so. But this time I responded back to him in person via email saying, okay, here are my current problems. And I gave him 2 problems, which are quality lead generation and hiring entry level, finding qualified entry level developers. And I gave that person concrete problems. I said my funnel is resulting in a wide percentage of unqualified leads. A very, very small percentage converts, less than 1%. I'm trying to figure out how to solve that problem. And 2, the entry-level devs I've been speaking to, in not just recently, but the past 2-3 years, they just need so much training to get up to level that by the time I get them trained up, they're already looking for the next job. And this has happened to me twice. So I'm giving this person a lot to work with. I'm giving him a lot of material, a lot of fodder to respond with a personalized set of tools or guides that I can use that he would employ to help address my problem. But no, he didn't do any of that. He went right into his sales pitch about why his technology is so superior for identifying the top talent in the world and all that stuff. He basically just went into his pre-scripted sales pitch. He was talking at me, not talking with me. And there was no real dialogue going on here. So that was it. I knew right away that this was not going to be a constructive relationship, and he did not close me. And so what you want to do is try to avoid that dynamic when you're meeting with a prospective client and you want to close that client. A couple ways you can do that. Number one, stop talking so much. You should be listening more than you're talking. If you're doing all the talking, if you're doing over half the talking, you're way off base here. You should be doing way less than half the talking. You should be listening to the problems and listening to what the client wants and the client's goals. Where do you want to be in 6 months? What do you hope to achieve in 9 months, 12 months? One of the first questions I always ask literally is, what is your end game? What is your end game? Because I need to know what the objectives are so I can know whether or not the work I'm producing is advancing towards that objective. So that's number one. Stop talking so much. Number two, show concrete applications. Show concrete examples where you have solved small problems that the client is currently dealing with. So for a good example in my case would be a prospective client comes to me with an pre-existing code base from a previous developer or a dev team, and he or she would say, right now we need to implement a credit card checkout because right now users check out to PayPal and that bounces them off the website and then back on after the transaction executes, and that's a poor user experience, which I agree. So then I would show the client, the prospective client, no fewer than 3 examples where I've implemented a self-hosted checkout solution using either Stripe or Braintree, which I've done in the past. And if you go on my website, turbo360.co, when you scroll to the bottom, you can do a credit card checkout, and that was implemented via Stripe. And that's one of the examples I show in addition to a couple more client examples. So the point is, show literal concrete examples where you have solved the same problem on behalf of another client. That's very powerful because it shows that you've already done this exact thing, that this is not something you'll be sort of fumbling your way through. So yeah, those are a couple tips that you can use right away to close a deal, close a new client in the startup world. You know, at the end of the day, you have to understand that you're dealing with human beings and they want to trust you. They want you to succeed, but they want to feel like you're aligned with their objectives, and so that everyone wins at the end. I will add a caveat that this advice is based on who you're talking to, obviously, but the more experienced the client is, the less of this connection is necessary. So if you're dealing with a prospective client who is a first-time founder who just I don't know, came out of a boot camp or like an accelerator, or they just raised a small round and they just quit their job and raised a small round to do their startup, and this is their first run at this, then everything I'm saying is very, very true. You want to establish an emotional connection. You want to have a face-to-face. Basically, these clients want to be known that they're taken care of, and they want to know that they can put their trust in you and not be completely taken advantage of. The more experienced clients are just looking for solutions. They don't really need as much of the emotional, I hesitate to call it hand-holding, but the connection, the human connection is not as necessary. These are people who've been in the game for a while. Maybe they've had 2 startups already that have exited. You know, maybe, whoops, the lights are turning off. All right, well, We'll just have to do this in the dark. Um, maybe they've worked for several startups in the past, things like that. Then these prospective clients don't need as much of a human connection. So just understand the difference between the two. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that sheds some light. It certainly has been the pattern in my career as far as doing contract engineering work on behalf of startups, and hopefully you can apply that to your own work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.